found out the end of our presentations. Thanks for letting me go get married. It was great, and I never have to do it again, ever, which is my favorite part. So my presentation today, I'm actually going to start with an activity, and I want you to look at this schedule. Can you read it okay? Is it pretty small? Pretty small? Okay, I'll read it to you. But I want you to think about the events on this calendar, and then tell me what area you think I have if you didn't look at your handouts, and if you don't use process of elimination, since I'm last, okay? So budgeting meeting, respond to parent inquiry, confidential, meeting with LS, Title IX evaluation planning meeting, welcome new retention coordinator, conference planning meeting, meeting with DM, student conduct review, agenda attached, meeting with JS, and then from 4:30 to 6, plan to attend student leaders for tomorrow networking event.
Dean of students?
Why do you think dean of students? What
Because
gave it away?
there was a mention of conduct in there, and then also like a new, I think you mentioned an associate dean.
What's that?
I think you mentioned like also like the dean of, someone had the title of dean in there somewhere.
DM, sorry.
Yeah.
That's just random initials, but still, yeah, definitely the conduct. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Oh, I would agree because of the timeline
Yep.
stuff.
You're asking why we think it would be that.
Right. Like which part of the schedule do you think?
Parent inquiry maybe?
Parent inquiry, nice. Yeah.
And you can also tell that it would be that by how long the appointments are, that they're like meaningful conversation items, not like short talk students.
Yeah, absolutely. And no free time.
No lunchtime.
Yeah. I was hoping someone would notice that. It's super small. But notice that lunch overlaps with another meeting, so pretzels on the go. So yes, Dean of Students. I'm going to start with a quote. The full quote is on the one page that you have, so separate from the brochure, so to speak. But I kind of summarized some of the main points that I think are applicable. So for the day's work, the Dean of Students has to be artful, but never deceptive, sympathetic, but not sentimental, deliberate, but not slow, strict, but constructive, consistent, but merciful, diplomatic, but direct, more eager to listen than to speak, and more eager to counsel than to command. So this is from Swain from 1945, which, yes, it's probably the Stone Age. But I did like how Swain was able to kind of still make it applicable to today in terms of the two kind of dichotomies, right? Diplomatic but direct. You know, how do you navigate both of those? Okay. So keep this in mind as we go forward. So let's talk about my interviewees. Their titles range from associate dean to dean of students. Their degrees, 2 had MA degrees and 2 had PhDs. 1 had a BS in social work, which she attributed to being very helpful in her career. I thought that was interesting. And Winston and colleagues in 2001 found that there was some disagreement in terms of what degrees SSAOs, Senior Student Affairs Officers, needed to get to their position. And I just thought that that was interesting in terms of our September discussion of when do you need a PhD, when do you not, right? They all started a residence life. They moved to career development, residence life, and career development. The majority of them had a pathway of assistant director, associate director, and then dean. Associate director, director, dean, right? And BIDIX in 2013 did a study of the common trajectory of an SSAO, and that was what the finding was. So I thought that was interesting as well, especially if you're thinking about doing this later in life. So what do they do? Yes, they do a lot. They serve as student advocates. They supervise departments and personnel. They oversee different functional areas, crisis management, retention and student persistence. This is kind of something that was interesting to me because when we put in our request for what area we wanted, I said retention, number 1, retention. And Jane came back with Dean of Students. And to be honest, I was like, come on, Jane, really, Dean of Students? That's not what he said. And, but in my project, I realized that often student persistence and retention is housed in this department, and or they played a huge role in assessment, right? So that was interesting. Enforce federal regulations, establish and implement policies, institutional, and then they have some impact in state and federal as well. Evaluate student conduct, conduct hearings and appeals, serve on committees, respond to student, faculty, staff, parent, community member issues for concerns, right? Basically anyone and everyone, they serve at the front line for those. And then those are the references and then my interviewees as well in terms of how I compile the data. I also want to note on the right-hand side, disciplinary resources and international students. One of my interviewees did both of those. So something to keep in mind as well, it does vary, right? Other duties as assigned, it depends. She was from a very small institution. Those two populations were small. So that's probably why she had them as part of her role. So another quote. This is from ACPA President Kent Porterfield. And again, the full quote is on your other sheet there. But bear with me, a couple things I want to point out. He was not actually a Dean of Students, but he was an SSAO, Senior Student Affairs Officer. Being a generalist in student affairs means juggling a lot of different issues. It often involves overseeing a multiplicity of functions and areas of practice. I spend much of my time thinking about leadership, strategy, organizational dynamics, climate, outcomes, and relationships. I rely on skills of listening, verbal and nonverbal communication, critical thinking, problem solving, community building. Summit refers to these as soft skills, but I have found that they are challenging to master and absolutely critical to achieving almost anything worth doing in student affairs work. I learned the importance of choosing words carefully, understanding why communication often fails, being authentic, staying positive, empathizing, understanding triggers of stress, being assertive without being aggressive, and reflecting. I've also come to appreciate the critical skill of negotiation, right? I'm actually partly happy that I'm presenting this month instead of October. I think a lot of our readings for this meeting this weekend align with a lot of what he's saying here. I think Dean of Students, what I found is they do a lot, right? And it really depends. And it is important to have those skills of negotiation, of being assertive, of being aggressive, etc. So another thing to reflect on. So what did my interviewees say about necessary skills? Anything with a star indicates that all four of them indicated this. So organization, communication, particularly with students, staff, faculty, parents, or community. Negotiation, flexibility, and trust. A couple of them also indicated that it was necessary to be willing to initiate conversation and relationships, both professionally, personally, with students, right, to kind of make that first contact, first step. Another one, well, actually a couple of them said extroversion, but another one right away when I said, what skills are necessary? She said, well, I'm an ESFJ. And I said, okay, great, that's wonderful. But she talked about how, it was necessary to, again, along with that initiate conversation, be extroverted, be willing to talk to people, be willing to go to events, rub elbows. So I thought that was something worth noting. And then two other of my interviewees noted authenticity, which is what Kent Porterfield also said, right? Some issues, some critical issues in the field, laws and policies, they feel a lot of pressures to comply. Some of the laws and policies that they have to follow, Section 504, ADA compliance, Department of Education, particularly as it relates to funding, right? If you don't follow Department of Ed regulations, like satisfactory academic progress, you could lose your institution's ability for Pell Grant, for SEOG, some of those supplemental grants. And that's detrimental to enrollment. Also, FERPA, FAWA, Title IX, clearly sexual misconduct. Another issue was what falls under the Dean of Students umbrella, right? It's different at every institution. So how do you kind of dictate, oh, I should supervise this area, or, oh, that one's not really under my purview? They talk about that being an issue. Technology, especially in relation to student conduct, Snapchat. They actually did talk about that, so that was interesting. And also the importance of assessment, right? The pressures of assessment at that institution and how Dean of Students is kind of responsible in that case, right? What they say, you want a 40-hour-a-week job in higher ed? Tell me more. So some rewards of this work, they talked about the growth of the student, seeing student development in action, the ability to influence, change, implement, or establish policy. So while it is a critical issue, they also found that rewarding. Student affairs in theory and in practice, and that they could help influence, encourage, and lead students. Some challenges that they faced, the big picture. So how does a Dean of Students execute the overall mission of the institution? especially like St. Thomas, what a mouthful, right? How do you execute that mission while also doing your day-to-day tasks, your supervision? I mean, look at that calendar. I think it was pretty realistic to say that. That's just a random Wednesday. How do you go through all those meetings and still think, oh, am I being, morally responsible? And how am I helping my institution? Well, it's kind of hard to do both, right? They talk about work-life balance. They're on 24/7 a lot of times weekends, evenings, and they have to lead difficult conversations. Title IX, sexual violence, assault, depression. I noted this one, although all mental health is applicable, but I noted this particularly because one of my interviewees talked about a situation in which she was called, a student had plans to attempt suicide and had written a letter and had called someone right prior. And how that was a Friday afternoon and they got together with Wellness Center and Health Services and Residence Life and Disability Resources. And how do you talk about reading that letter? How do you talk about addressing that student's issue? And then also difficult conversations in terms of conduct, right? Some of those conversations are not easy to navigate. My Res Life people probably know how that goes. Another challenge is the impact and the responsibility of a dean of students. They decide cutting funding on programs. No one wants to make those hard decisions. No one wants to be that bad person, right? They do a lot of budgets, especially for the areas they supervise. And then also, along with that, the climate of the institution. So when they make those tough decisions, how does that impact the institution? And how do the students feel about those decisions? Not great, right? Maybe protest, maybe letter, a terrible letter, Dr. Joy, something bad on her door. Those kinds of things. What they do in their free time, free is used loosely, no pun intended. They read about campus in the Chronicle. They attend ACPA, NASPA, ASCA, that's the Student Conduct Association, and they talked about some, I don't want to say discrepancies necessarily, but they were very partial on which professional association they were involved with. They either were very much ACPA or very much NASPA, right? But Ryan Gosling would never make us choose.
No, I could.
We would do it for Ryan. What they recommend for all of us as incoming student affairs professionals, don't limit ourselves. Take any and all opportunities, free webinars, conferences, learn policies. Get experience to see what works and or what doesn't fit for us, right? I think I'm a pretty good example of that this year. And that's great. You never know what you're going to like unless you try it, right? Find or create assistantships to suit your interests, strengths, future career path. I know we talked about this a little bit in this program, but they really stressed it. Do something for free. Do something volunteer. That's great. Oh, great, right? We have loans. But do that, and then hopefully they can give you some kind of stipend, and they can pay you. But guess what? You're doing something that you're interested in, and that's going to further you when you graduate. Is that 10 minutes?
Yeah, it is. So you'll have like 5 left. So
Perfect. Perfect. Get experience in crisis management, counseling, mediation, sanction, and the tough stuff, right? The stuff that no one wants to talk about, the stuff that no one wants to do. If you want to go into this area, do it, and do it soon, right? So you can get better at it. Take responsibility of self. Very important right now as grad students, right, as we are overwhelmed and stressed and struggling. They said there's no better time than at 24, 26, 30 to learn how to do that, right? It's only going to be worse if you're 45, 50. The job search, mission and values influence a lot. They said you can maybe love the job, but if you don't like the institution, you don't align with that, it's not going to do you any good. And then be honest with yourself. What are your passions, strengths, and weaknesses? And again, a lot of this does align with the reading for this weekend, particularly the self-reflection, which is the last activity I am going to have us do quick. So I want you to do a little self-reflection, some introspection, some of your own strengths and your limitations. I think the great thing about this project is we're finding out, oh, wow, I'd be great at that, or no, I wouldn't, or oh, I really like that, or no, I wouldn't. And like I said, I came into this wanting retention. I came out saying, I really like this functional area, and I really want to pursue it. So I'm hoping that you all gain something from this as well. So that is on the other part of your handout towards the bottom. So some of ideas would be specific skills that would align with this area, some that would not, so maybe some weaknesses, personally or professionally. And then I did myself, so hopefully you all feel more inclined to do this. I said that I'd be skilled at supervising people and managing stress and responsibility. I also think I'd be skilled at leading difficult conversations. I would have difficulty because I'm very caring